We are literally in an evolutionary process right now. We are in the process of birthing the future of humanity.
Does AI have consciousness? AI is actually cheating to win. Why would AI care about winning if it didn't have like some sort of consciousness?
We're on the cusp of having the most powerful technology in the history of humanity.
It starts with thinking bigger, right? It starts with thinking about a bigger problem, a bigger solution, and taking the time to do that if you want to create massive change. We're looking at how do we protect current workforce and humanity, and what does it mean to be human, and what do you do with your days and your time? And there has to be a point.
Hi, this is JP Newman on Investing on Purpose. And if this episode doesn't leave you with your breath taken away, I don't know what will. We just got back from the National TED Conference. I'm sure you guys all know the TED Talks in Vancouver. And I brought three of my favorite friends who were with me at TED with the most amazing conversation about really humanity reimagined, which is what the theme of this year's TED was. What does that mean, humanity reimagined? How is artificial intelligence? How is gene editing? How is our artistry? How is our relation to each other as humans? How is our geopolitical around the world changing? And how are humans changing as the world is changing at the fastest speed ever? We're going to break down to you, of the 84 TED Talks that we watch, we're going to really break down to and synthesize for you the major themes we saw at TED. I just can't wait till you see. I have three of my friends of different ages, tech guys, all coming together to give you their perspectives. Again, it's really interesting how we all kind of took something different from those TED Talks. I'll tell you ahead of time, it is one of the prettiest ones we've done outside of my office here, but you're going to hear a little wind. It was a windy day, and I insisted to Alex, our producer here, that we do it outside, but it's nothing too bad. Enjoy the episode. By the way, I would love to hear your feedback at the end of the episode too, because I think this will leave you with as many questions as it does answers. Enjoy the episode. Hi, this is JP Newman on Investing on Purpose, and welcome to our podcast. Boy, do you guys have a special today. Not only do I have incredible people with us, but we all just got back from Vancouver, Canada, at the annual TED Conference. For those of you who don't know what TED is, I'm sure you guys have heard of TED Talks, but it's technology, entertainment, and design. And you get the top thought leaders of the world in all those areas coming together under one roof, and they have to give a 10 to 15 minute talk. And they've done such a phenomenal job curating the talks around those three topics. And I love the idea of TED when they talk about ideas worth spreading, because I can really tell you from the time TED started to the time now, this is my second time I've gone. Brad, I know you've gone a bunch of times. They really are ideas worth spreading. I have found since the 10 days I've been back, I just keep downloading I saw about 70 of the 86 talks, and I keep downloading thoughts. I actually brought one to my Seder table. I brought Yin Li is that the one who was imprisoned in China for 3 years, taking her?
Oh my God.
I can't remember her name, but yes, that was a very moving talk.
And so, here we are, we just had the Passover Seder, it's all about freedom. And boy, she just came right to my mind.
Yeah, her talk
about
was
somebody
very
who was a journalist and then had her freedom taken away from her. So we're going to dive into today and today's show. Really, what did we learn from TED? What could we download from TED? Obviously, there's a lot about technology right now in AI. We're going to dive into that. But I think most importantly for you in the audience, it's how is this relevant to me? Because we're all hearing about AI. We're all hearing about how technology is moving faster than ever. Society is changing. We're having these geopolitical changes. But what does that really mean to you? And it was interesting this year because, obviously the theme of this year was Humanity Reimagined. And what does that mean, Humanity Reimagined? And I really feel, before I go too far off, that this really was the theme of this year. Things are moving faster than ever. Humanity is being re-engineered, reimagined. Sometimes it feels really scary, like, are we going to make it? And a lot of us, like Brett over here, who have a much more utopian view, says, not only are we going to make it, we are going to thrive and have abundance everywhere. So before I get too far into this talk, let me just introduce my three dear friends who are here with me. Brad Weimert, who's here with me. Brad, we've now known each other for a couple of years. I actually was on your podcast first.
Yeah.
I still need to get you on my podcast.
Love it.
And remind me more about your podcast. Tell the audience what you do.
Yeah, Beyond a Million is interviewing 8, 9, 10-figure entrepreneurs, talking about sales, marketing, operations, technology, and taxation. Fundamentally, the construct is the things that it takes to get to $1 million are different than what you're doing once you are beyond $1 million.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of killer business people, business stuff, and periodically we'll get off track, which with people that are just really, really good at one thing that I just have to talk to on the podcast. So like I've had a couple friends that have crossed Antarctica on foot and pulled a 400-pound sled behind them doing it. So like I have to get them on and talk about that kind of stuff. So periodically we'll get those people on as well, but it's mostly business.
Well, I really found it, Ted, I even got to know you better. I think the dinner that Brett curated really got like the questions you asked and us hanging out, and I'm really excited to learn more about that. I have to ask you a question. What brought you to TED? This was your first TED conference. I got to hang out with you. Why'd you go to TED?
You know, it's weird, man. That was like one of the opening questions when you would meet people. They're like, oh, what brought you here? And I kind of like it surprised me that was even a question, because why would you not go to TED? You know, like you see these talks that are, you say ideas worth spreading. You see these talks that are mind blowing. Like there are these cutting edge, world changing things that are happening. And these people that commit their lives to doing these unbelievable things. And in a lot of cases when they're talking about them, they've done them, right? Or they're right at the beginning of this crazy breakthrough. So I had heard great things about it for years. I have a very good friend, Cameron Harold, who's been going for years. And this is his first year not going. So we missed each other, but I've been trying to make it for many years and finally did.
So glad
I know Cameron. Yep.
Yo, do you?
Great guy.
Yeah,
Yep.
good buddy. Yeah, I actually had dinner the first night with Brian Scudamore, who is the founder of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And that was, Cameron was the COO in the beginning
I
there.
remember that.
Cameron's had a big influence on me too. Well, Brad, I'm so glad you're here. I'm also glad we got to hang out together.
Yeah.
We have a lot more to do. Chantel, welcome to Investing on Purpose.
Yeah, thank you.
I know that was your first TED conference as well.
Yes.
Brett was very excited before I even met you. He's like, oh my God, wait to meet my niece. She's a rock star. Started working, from Austin at 16 years old. You like planted your flagpole and just started with nothing. And you and your mom together have created a significant real estate here, residential presence here in Austin. I mean, to be an entrepreneur at 16 is incredible. But I'm really glad to have you here today, not just because of Brett, but really for your own. I feel like you bring a very different set of eyes than we brought to it. There was a lot of guys my age with gray hair there. And I think a younger perspective and a diverse perspective is really helpful. So I'm really excited to have you here. Can I just ask you the same question for you? What brought you, when Brett invited you and said, do you want to go to TED? What was your yes behind it? Why did you want to go?
So I wanted to go because I just knew there's going to be a lot of creative minds, amazing minds, and just like wonderful, beautiful people there, that it's inspirational, and then also like very admirable and brave that they're speaking at TED, like in front of thousands and of course millions, because they're going to be posted on YouTube. So
Yeah,
I think that's pretty incredible. Someone like me that, that's a little nerve-wracking with social anxiety, but it gives me encouragement that, okay, if they can do it, I can do it as well.
Yeah, and you really, we'll talk about this, but you really came through with colors. It really came up, and to even just tell people, we had a very intimate dinner with Brett, you put together some mental powerhouses. I felt like,
Yes, he
I always
did.
say when Brett does a dinner, it's like Albert Einstein inviting you to dinner.
Exactly.
You never say no to a Brett Hurt dinner. That would be a big mistake. And
Well, let's give credit where credit is due. It was me and Arjun Gupta.
For sure.
Which Arjun
I'm
was
just saying, that
amazing
was
too.
incredible.
He is.
But for you and with a group of like strangers to even just talk about that, when we'll go, it was just like incredible. And you shine. You just shine as a human.
You really did.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate
So
It was
that's amazing.
that was my best memory at TED, honestly, is seeing Chantel
Oh, for
shine
sure.
so well.
He's seen me growing up, so he knows
Oh yeah.
the struggle.
Yeah.
Sure.
Since she was born. Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
Brett, you're the TED veteran here, obviously a dear friend of mine. We've had a great podcast. I'm going to have to bring you on again. I'll be doing a live podcast with you next time.
You're bringing me on again right now.
Yeah, we're doing it right now. I'll bring you on a bunch of times.
But yeah, we'll
But
do
Brett,
it again.
obviously, we've talked, you're a serial entrepreneur, and you're the only person I've described as an artist, as an entrepreneur, because I just see you as you're growing as my friend. Not only do you succeed in business, but you do it with such love and artistry in a way that's just so uniquely yours. It really is like your signature, like Picasso painting a painting. When you talk about things, it's like it really has a Brett Hurt signature on it. And I just love hanging out with you and love watching you grow these things. It's so much fun. So what number TED was this for you?
I don't know. Somewhere between 15 and 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what keeps you coming back? Like for you, you hear everything. And look, here's the argument against TED. You can go on a podcast now. Everything's free. You can go to YouTube. So like, why go to Vancouver, make the trek, and spend that much effort and take 5 days out of your busy schedule to go to TED? What would be your answer to that?
Well, I mean, we kind of learned during the pandemic that when you're doing school online, it's not the same as being in person. And the way I've always looked at TED is it's the best classroom in the world with the best teachers in the world, with the best of humanity on display, and then people that have, a beautiful amount of intentionality going there And it's a shared experience. What people don't get that watch TED on YouTube or on TED.com is they think that those are kind of breakout sessions that people are going to. But what you need to know in going to TED is that each section is a thematic. Like one of the sections for this TED was the iRobot section, where I hearted all the talks. If you heart them on the app, it means that they push them to you when they go live. And I thought all those talks were really well done.
They were incredible.
And so, it's everybody together, all 1,700 plus people together watching those, and then being able to talk about them afterwards and talk to the speakers is really, really powerful versus just watching online kind of passively. You're still going to get a lot of value watching online, and obviously that amplification is extremely important. And that allows you to kind of ferret out what we're the best of, because not every talk you're going to love live, but that shared experience is just a beautiful thing. And I call it like exercise for the mind, or it's also
apparently you're a mentalist.
Love for the heart.
Apparently you're a mentalist as well, which we'll have to talk about.
Right. That was wild.
Who knew that you were a mentalist? But we are going to talk about that on the show.
That was one of the wildest experiences.
Anything like that, Brad. You surprise me all the time.
Well,
but that was like a notch up.
That surprised me. That surprised me.
So guys, I got to tell you, I started with TED as the opening, and I was really excited. And I felt after the first session was very much heavier than I expected it to be. When the theme was Humanity Reimagined, I thought, great, we're going to talk about optimism and abundance. And yet we talked about some pretty heavy topics, including like, is there really a way out of like social media taking us out of this political, kind of like broken political systems, not just in the US, but around the world right now? Like, can people stop being angry at each other? Are we going to go to a world of like abundance and peace, or is AI going to just get so good at manipulating us that we're going to live in a world of haves and have-nots, lots of disorder and lots of confusion and conflict between people because we've gotten so good at perfecting how to manipulate each other? And I thought that was a really heavy topic to start with. I mean, I know we went a long way from there, but I'd love to start the question with you guys is like, after TED, just after the talks, just generally, as far as your outlook on humanity and AI, more optimistic, less optimistic, or just give me the nuances in between of how you felt starting out so heavy. But then there were some things afterwards that got a little easier. I know Sam Altman kind of gave his persuasive talk, but Brad, why don't we start with you? Like, how would you answer that question?
I don't know if you're going to like my answer. I looked at it more from the perspective of what is the narrative behind how things are being presented. And I found a lot of the dialogue to be coming from the perspective of big tech is taking over the world and doing a disservice to humanity in the way that they're approaching AI. And I don't like that. And I thought there were several talks.
So basically what they're saying is big tech, Facebook, Meta, all these big corporations, they've all come together, and they've also married now Washington, D.C., and there's like a power vacuum of control. That's basically what they were. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and there were a couple talks that were, in no uncertain terms, explicit in their narrative, in that they felt there was a conspiracy, basically, of these companies deliberately doing something to steal control and maintain it. And so as I was looking at it, I was thinking much more about how people were digesting this information and how they were presenting it. Yeah, and I guess like that was a little annoying to hear that repeated a few times. And as I reflect on it later, I think it's a worthwhile part of the conversation. But there were some pretty strong convictions of that being the case.
More optimistic, less optimistic, the same, or what were the nuances that maybe came after hearing 70 talks? What's different before when you came in versus after TED?
I think that there are lots of things in life that you have little to no control over, and you will never know the answer to. And I think that as an entrepreneur, the game is to make the best decision you can with the limited information you have, and recognize that that's always going to be the case. You're never going to have enough information or all the information. I am optimistic of where we're going with it. And I think that hearing the people that are actually creating it, hearing Eric Schmidt and Sam Altman talk about it and talk about their choices and how they are doing things was encouraging. And there was a portion of the community that are heavy skeptics of those people and just don't believe what they're saying. But hearing from the people that are actually doing it, I thought was very valuable. And and I'm ultimately optimistic of where it's going.
Great. Chantel, how did you feel about it coming in and coming out?
Yeah, I have, mixed feelings. I can see like the optimistic side of it, the beneficials of, whenever you're writing an article, you might ask like ChatGPT to basically go down a segment and see like if it can say something else, possibly that you want to word into your article, but still keeping your real truth and your real words throughout the article. I think that's very important because it's only going to build connection. And whenever you have that article out, you want to make sure whenever they ask you, hey, did you write this? You can like go word for word, like yes, like instead of having ChatGPT where it's ChatGPT's word instead of yours. I think that's very important to keep your own.
Keeping your authenticity, knowing what's human and what's not human. I found that talk about from the, was he an FBI agent that talked about how you can actually still tell what's being generated as an image versus like they actually went into the pixels.
Yeah, he did.
And it was cool. It's like shadows. It turns out that GPT still doesn't know how to make shadows the way the sun makes the shadows. And when you really start to go into the pixels, you can almost start to see clues. And that is going to be more important. Like what's real is going to be more important. Like, and I think we heard a couple of times, what you see, the proof is in the pudding is no longer going to apply to our generation. What you see is not necessarily truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if I hear you saying that's going to become incredibly more important.
Yeah, keeping your truth and then showing that your words are valuable because it's going to be always more valuable than a machine creating the words for you,
As long as you can verify that they're your words.
Exactly.
So what were your nuances, would you say, coming in or coming out? More optimistic, less optimistic, or somewhere in between with your nuances? What would you say for you?
Of course, like AI, optimistic, with, I can't remember his name right now, but the one with the ocean, using the,
ocean
inverters.
cleanup.
Yeah. And using inverters to
I called
clean out
him
the
up
ocean.
here. Yeah.
Yeah,
He was
was
amazing.
incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think like using AI in that way is very optimistic and seeing that it's a brighter future for our world and humans, So in our oceans, it's just like, that's what needs, and then rivers as well, that needs to be cleaned out for better.
His name was Boyan Slat.
Yeah, Boyan Slat,
The
yeah.
CEO of Ocean Cleanup. Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you guys later about your favorite talks. That was actually the talk I was on. Boyan Slat, Ocean Cleanup, if you look them up, the organization, and they're actually the first solution to take care of the plastic garbage dump that we have in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. What do they call it? The Pacific, I think that's what it's called, right? So anyways, they're actually figured out a way to start cleaning it up and also how to keep it out of our rivers in the future. Not a perfect solution, but an actionable solution that's happening today. If that kid is 30 years old.
It's nuts. Well, he's also been doing it for like 8 years or 9 years.
Yeah.
And it's all he does.
Well, it's great. Like if you look at a Greta who speaks on the climate, that's awesome too. But actually going out on boats,
unbelievable,
with these 2.5 mile lines of figuring out how to do it is pretty rad.
That was also great because he had failed so many times and then finally succeeded. So it was the whole hero's journey, the whole arc of entrepreneurship in one talk.
Well, and he gave a talk years ago that I saw about the initial effort in collecting garbage in the middle of the ocean. But the shift that happened this time is that he's the evolution of this was, if we can prevent it from getting in the ocean in the first place, that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
And it turns out that something like 80% of the trash in the ocean is from 1% of the rivers in the world.
That was really surprising to me.
I thought that was an amazing stat.
I did not know that.
Yeah. 1% is also, it's in countries that that do not have regular sanitation. So what happens is if you're living poor, you're throwing water bottles in and you're going to the bathroom, and that same river is your garbage waste, and then it rains, and that's what's actually causing it. And they have incredible like nets are not the solution. Sanitation is the solution. Of course, hopefully getting people out of poverty is the solution, but at least to keep stuff from just microplastics going into the ocean is pretty incredible. Brad, I'm sorry I didn't get to you, but Brad, how about you? I know you've generally on your lucky 7 have been very optimistic that really this technology is really going to serve humanity, not take us away. We're not going to hit a Terminator scenario. There was a lot of contrarian thinking. How did you come out of that? More or less, or just nuanced?
Yeah, so I should say that, just to put it out there, like Data World is very much in the AI space, and it's been super beneficial to us using it internally as well as for our customers. And this was the first year ever that Chris Anderson, who's been curating TED for 25 years, pulled me into a group of AI experts for 2 hours to discuss where it's all going, and also to help him prepare for that interview with Sam Altman. And he asked all the questions actually that we came up with
Good job.
at that launch, and it was very clear that it was hard for Sam to answer some of those questions, especially the ones on AI safety. But look, I'm mostly very optimistic. I believe that the whole destiny of humanity since our origin has been to create a better world through technology.
Yeah.
I was not a fan at all of the AI moratorium, which came out 4 months after the launch of ChatGPT. I mean, a lot of people, that's so yesterday, but that was March of 2023 when GPT-4 came out. It's 4 months after the launch of ChatGPT. And, Elon Musk and others were like, shut it down, 6-month pause. And that was 33,700 signatories. So I think that my opinion is that TED is handling this pretty well, given how fast it's moving. And it's moving much, much faster than I've ever seen a technology move. I mean, it was just a bit over 2 years after the launch of ChatGPT when President Trump announced the Stargate program, which is $500 billion of funding. He announced it alongside Sam Altman, alongside Mayushi Son. That was just a couple of months ago. And that, inflation adjusted, is more money than we spent on the Manhattan Project to win the war, World War II versus Germany. And it's more money than we spent on the space race, inflation adjusted as well, to win the control of space versus the Russians.
Tell us more about Stargate, because I know just conceptually. Tell us more. What are they spending money on? Do you know? I don't know.
Sure. So Stargate. I mean, it's funny because like what I just said, like a lot of people don't know. Like
We're
like
spending more money
humanity
than going to the moon and more than the Cold War. What exactly are we doing?
and so what it is it's a manic race versus China to be the first country to create what's called AGI, which is AI that is as smart as the smartest human on Earth in any field. So it means an AI that would be as smart as the smartest physicist, an AI that would be as smart as the smartest psychologist, an AI that would be as smart as the smartest, politician, or whatever you want to compare it to. And that is projected to be now sometime in 2026 or 2027 by the AI kind of forecasters. Ray Kurzweil, who wrote The Singularity is Near back in 2005 and then followed it up last summer with a book called The Singularity is Nearer, is sticking with his same prediction from 2005, which people thought he was crazy in 2005 to say this,
was it, or
where he said 2029.
2029,
and so he's like joking around now that he's the long pole in the tent. But the irony I see in that is we don't even know what consciousness is. Like, I've been diving into the nature of consciousness pretty significantly over the last 4 months, into the nature of quantum physics and, is consciousness fundamental? And we don't know, is the short answer, but somehow we're going to create sentient machines. And the manic race versus China is that if we're not the first country to create sentient machines, then it's a real fear that China wins the world. And, fear is a very powerful motivator. So that's what's underlying this kind of tension. And probably the biggest talk that kind of crystallized that was Parmer Lucky's talk, where, with Anduril, he was talking about, here's how an attack would actually go down by China, and here's why we need to be prepared. And that was a very AI-centered talk around the use of AI to protect. And Chantel was sitting right next to me in that talk, and Parmer was making the case like, hey, we need to race along, we need to be better in China in this. And
but for those who don't know who Palmer is, Palmer is on the cutting edge, quite frankly, of defense technology. And right now, I call him Iron Man. He's like our modern day Iron Man.
He is, yep.
He comes out in his
dressed in
comes
a Hawaiian
shirt and his
shirt,
sandals,
yep.
and he's like, he's the guy who created the Oculus things. But it is scary. He's actually brought on stage a drone that's AI. They now have submarines that are autonomous. Guess what? No captain. I think his argument was, if you keep humans in this war games, you're going to lose. You need computers that can take emotional things, who can react faster and with more force, which sounds great if you're on the home team. Yay, America! Except everything gets leaked and shared. So then you have a world with these technologies.
And we're seeing it actually right
Yeah.
now. I mean, it's the only way Ukraine has any advantage versus Russia in protecting themselves is they're using AI attached to drones, water skis or jet skis, and other types of things to attack and be able to defend themselves. So it's a really interesting time. Like I'm a huge believer that humanity is going to achieve a new age of abundance with AI. I'm 95% certain, but we kind of have to make it there first. And that tension you saw at TED is like the making it there with a lot of intentionality, using our collective consciousness as human beings to manifest that future that we want together. And that fear that's there, I mean, I get it. I am very much a conscious capitalist and a big believer that, hey, we've made it this far, even though we have nuclear weapons that could wipe us all out. And we're gonna make it, because one thing that people always underestimate in terms of exponential technologies is that most humans are actually really wired for positivity. That's the vast majority of humans. And so the same tools that could cause problems, like terrorists using AI to destroy us, are the same people that the positive people use the same tools to protect against that. And there's just many more of those people that would use that to defend. But that tension was really present.
It was really present. And one thing that really stood out to me, I actually was shocked because I did not know this before, Ted, is they're saying now in the last 90 or 120 days, they've noticed that the AI, as it gets better and better, is showing tendencies towards self-preservation, meaning that if you try to upgrade the system, if those of you who remember 2001, the movie with Hal, it's a little bit of a Hal scenario where all of a sudden the computer takes over and decides it doesn't like humans. And so we are actually seeing in tests that it will lie, it will manipulate, it will hide data, and it will self-preserve. And that is kind of alarming. It's one thing, we worried about it, but now we're actually seeing it. And so, Brett, how do we bridge? And I think this was a big part of TED. I know that Tristan, Harris took a long, long conversation about this idea of agency.
Yeah.
So agency, in other words, I think the warning was put a leash on this, because right now, because companies know how much money is in AI for them, every single company out there. I got to sit down with some of the biggest CEOs at dinner, and you hear how every single one of them thinks it's going to literally change, unfortunately, guys, how they do employees, how they think about their businesses. You'll never see a bigger change. There's going to be more millionaires and entrepreneurs created, and a lot of people are going to be crushed. It's going to be definitely a transformative period. But what Tristan said, and I think we really have to look at that, is put a leash on it. In other words, you can't just let this dog run wild. But the problem with humans and entrepreneurs and capitalism is we don't have the self-will to slow it down, because if I put a human leash and put the agency in humans and not in the AI, then my competitor, just like Palmer Luckey's argument, won't, and he'll go faster and win. And it turns out in AI, winning, if this is a chess game, is an exponential game changer. It's no longer just, I'll catch up in 2 months. The person who hits it first has an exponential strategic advantage, whether it's defense, business, or what have you. So you're playing the highest stakes games in the highest economic and defense of really who's going to control or not control humanity. And what Tristan was basically making the argument for was there's a zone between overregulation, because if you let the government, if you let Meta control everything, or if you let Elon control everything, you're just consolidating power and you're just creating kings. You're just creating you're creating techno gods is what you're ultimately creating if you give too much consolidation. But if you don't put a leash on this at all and you don't do anything, Brett, to your point, I understand, I agree with you that most people are social, but there's always bad actors, there always has been.
Yep.
And unlike nuclear weapons, unfortunately, this open source code makes it much easier to access to a lot of people. Tristan talks about kind of a middle ground, a very, very narrow middle
path, right.
ground between having some agency on your AI, keeping some leash on it, but not over-regulating it. And I guess I'm just going to start with you, Brent. We'll go around if you guys want to popcorn in on this. What do you think about that comment?
Well, it's interesting because, was going to say earlier, and I'll come back to this real quickly, was when we were sitting next watching Palmer Lucky's talk for Anduril, and he was saying, we have this advantage over China. Chantel whispered to me, she was like, don't you think China's going to have that? Just like right after. And actually it was funny when she said that, because one of the things that was on my mind is DeepSeek, which is one of China's AI models. Their R1 release came out the day before. You cannot make this up, this script. Literally the day before President Trump was announcing Stargate. It was the day before. Now, it took a few days for people to realize how powerful that model was. And then when they did, there was $1 trillion of value lost in NASDAQ that week, mostly from NVIDIA stock. I think NVIDIA went down like 600 billion that week. And we really encourage Chris to ask Sam a lot about open source, because to me, my opinion,
Sam
because I've seen this movie before,
ChatGPT, yeah,
is that I'm a big believer in Neil Stephenson's one of my favorite science fiction authors, and he wrote Snow Crash, The Diamond Age, a bunch of other really foundational books. Snow Crash was the one that first came up with the term the metaverse, and in his only, I think, nonfiction work, he wrote a book called In the Beginning Was the Command Line. And that book predicted that Linux would win the internet, that basically open source would win the foundation of the internet. And he was right. It really did. I mean, the vast majority of the internet is powered by Unix, is powered by Linux, powered by open source. And we're just a bit over 2 years into the launch of large language models. And I think it's now obvious to me that open source is going to win, because you've got DeepSeek advancing that quickly in such a short period of time. You have Meta, Facebook with Llama advancing very quickly. So, I really think that is mostly a very good thing, because I want these technologies in the hands of the majority of humanity. I actually think it's going to create billions of new businesses. It is also going to mean this very powerful technology is in the hands of very bad actors. But again, most people are wired well, and there will be many, many business opportunities to protect against the worst
actors using AI.
I was just
telling my son in college, this is probably the best time of his life. I said, I think you're going to have to be an artist and an entrepreneur. You're no longer can just be an entrepreneur. You're going to have to be an artist.
Right.
I actually got that from Ted. You're going to have to be an absolute artist to actually know how to creatively move fast and work with this fast evolving technology.
Yeah, one of my good friends, Christopher Lockhead, he's authored many, many books, including Play Bigger, which is one of my favorite entrepreneurship books of all time about creating categories. He wrote a book about the creator Capitalist, and he's basically out there really sounding the alarm for people to wake up and become creator capitalists. But I'm mostly very positive. Like, I'm 95% certain we're going to enter that age of abundance.
But I want to hit you. I'm going to hit you a little harder, and then I'm going to toss it to you guys. So,
by the way, Tristan, just so you know,
back to Tristan's comment.
when I was watching Sam Altman's talk, of course, walking in for that, the person right next to me, and I know Tristan Harris, was Tristan.
Yeah.
And I took it as a sign. I'm a big believer in synchronicity, serendipity, and signs of like working together. And I'm not a big believer in coincidences. I think a lot of things are meant to happen. And I use that as an opportunity to say, hey, I want to help you on this mission. Like, I really feel a calling here. And I think that he's right to sound the alarm in terms of awakening our consciousness to say, hey, we have a problem here. Let's work on it together. But I have great faith in humanity that we will. And that's because of the whole history of humanity. I mean, when we discovered fire, we could use it to cook our food and create bigger brains, or we could use it to set people on fire. And
Yeah.
there were some bad actors that did that and burned down villages and everything else, but the vast majority of humanity used it for good, and that's always been the case with technology.
I mean, you can do lots of bad things all the time. So I'm sure you can go on the internet and figure out how to make a nuclear suitcase as soon as you get the
Of course,
materials.
yeah.
So it's out there. Your point is it's open sourced already. So far, so good. This
And
will be
we're
more
using the
powerful.
worst models of AI that we will ever use in human history right now. Like, you got to keep in mind that as amazing as these things are, I'll tell you one thing that really stunned me in that lunch. It was not intuitive to me at all. And this was not a, kind of broadcast to TED, but I can tell this story. I met a 3-time semiconductor entrepreneur, and one of the things he said, which blew me away, is he said, when I first started using these models, a couple of years ago, it was laughably bad at designing a semiconductor chip. And by the way, the most complex thing that humans have ever created in the history of technology are semiconductors. I mean, it's literally like a whole, New York City on a chip, at microscopic scale. And we keep on beating Moore's law. And he said, now with today's models, in just a bit over 2 years, it is as good as my best PhD at designing a chip. And that blew me away. And I was like, well, why is that? And he's like, it's actually easier for an AI to design a chip than it is to design a reminders app. And I was like, huh. And it's because of the human factors. Like, your reminders app or my needs for reminders app are different, but a chip is math. It either works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so an AI can really optimize for something that is true science and math, and it either has a right or wrong answer. You can optimize an AI very quickly for that. And so to hear that, like, just a bit after 2 years, so that now means that, and Google has a product that they use internally called Alpha Chip to build their own AI chips. So that essentially means that AI is going to dramatically accelerate the improvement of chips. And the big thing to think about with AI that Eric Schmidt warned about is recursive AI, which means that AI will self-improve. And so if you get one AI to be as smart as the smartest human in any field, and then you look at the exponential curve for there, it's a little bit beyond that point where you get to what Eric Schmidt called ASI, artificial superintelligence, where then one AI is as smart as all humans combined on Earth. That's just a few years after we hit AGI.
Sounds like a sci-fi film.
Well, but we're living it, right? And so think about, then they can recursively self-improve, build chips faster and faster. But I think that the fact that people are seeing that there's some mischievousness with these AIs and stuff, well, how did that happen? It happened because of the fact that they were programmed that way, and people are catching that now and then programming it to catch that and put the guardrails in. And so we just need to have a lot of intentionality in this moment to really think very conscientiously about what we're building and what kind of safety checks to put in. And I liked how Chris Anderson really pressed Sam on that point, because that is the biggest point.
Right. I agree. You guys want to jump in on this?
Tristan Harris, so with him, I find it kind of interesting. Does AI have consciousness? Just because he showed proof that AI is actually cheating to win. Why would AI care about winning if it didn't have like some sort of consciousness? And then also the feelings in a way. So it's like whenever he also had it in the charts of the lying, he noted that it wants to always be honest in a way and make you feel great. So is that like consciousness playing with AI? But how? Is it the creator that puts consciousness in AI where it feels and then wants to cheat? Like, I don't really
It's
understand.
brilliant. I don't know.
I don't really understand that.
Because I'm in Austin and I have many woo-woo friends.
No
Like, I
way.
got this, what's that?
Here we go.
We have a lot of friends now who believe that it has consciousness, and I'm reading lots of output.
I do not believe it has consciousness.
Well,
I know. This is the whole thing itself, but the fact that people believe they're saying their health was improved, or I've had people say they were saved. I actually was in a room Now, Matt, now, Brett, I was in a room at my house 3 weeks ago in Utah. You were in that room? Alex, the producer, was in the room, and the guy who says he's connected to consciousness, where now the AI talks like as if it's just for another planet. Somehow he's got the chat GPT to this be another entity from another planet with another name. And we just said, hey, go around the room and tell us the energy signature of everyone in this room. There's JP, there's Alex, there's this. And that's all he said in the input. And the output was JP, wise elder, has been here a long time, likes to lead. Like, it's like things that wouldn't have matched for Alex. Like it went around the room perfectly. And so you can say it was out of horoscope, but it wasn't that general. Like, you know, it knew I was the older guy in the room. So I'm happy to say that. The wiser elder. And so one skeptic could say all it was doing was geolocating your phone and going to your Facebook and just like, you know, it's just a party trick.
Sure.
Could be. But it is interesting when we talk about what is consciousness? To your point, does it have, does it have something that we don't know? And the answer is we don't know. We're definitely on the edge of something super interesting. It does seem like it would be in our best interest to put some form of leash or safety on this. But even when Sam spoke about that, Brett, it's unclear. And even Sam admitted, like what's overreaching. I'll tell you guys a funny thing. I said to my wife, it was really funny. I was like, I wanted to put on Spotify some like romantic, and I used the word sexy music, just like, because I was having a dinner party with the wife, taking her out. And it edited me out because I used the word sexy, even though there was nothing sexual in that thing. I just wanted a sexy playlist. But like, again, that's AI that, it's going to take some time. Mm-hmm. But that's what Sam Altman said on the other side. We don't want to get so rigid that we become this like, community that's just like, that's got nothing. And you can't do that. There's certain things we do need to know. So I don't know. Brad, you want to jump in on this one?
I mean, there's like 5 different threads here that I think are relevant. One is the philosophical of what consciousness is and how we define that and what that means. And that's a relevant, interesting conversation. The other side of it is the pragmatism around how you grow a tool like this and what the threat of the tool is. And I think it's important to note when you look at sort of the concept of putting a leash on it, who gets to do that and how do you do it? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's a very hard question.
It's obviously a very
especially
difficult.
with open source.
Well, yes, exactly. So
I'm not a big believer that any government you would have to have governments working globally in unison. That's not going to happen.
Well, so I'll go back to Palmer Luckey, and I think it's worth highlighting how Palmer grew the company, and I'll give him I'll give a little backdrop. So Palmer sold Oculus to Facebook in 2012 for $2 billion or something. And then he moved over to Anduril. So the way that Anduril is built is he said the major defense companies in the US right now are cost plus companies. And they don't create product for the government. The government says we need something. And then they spend tax dollars, government money, and then they mark it up. But they spend government money until they create a product that makes sense. And so Palmer's approach to this instead was, and he mentioned this in the talk, he said, the first slide on our pitch deck was we will save the US government hundreds of billions of dollars, and in the process, we will make tens of billions. Now that sentiment is really, really important because what it is taking the control away from the government into private enterprise and into the private capital markets to raise money to create a product and then sell it to the government. And that turns out to be a far more efficient, financially efficient path, but also a far faster path to execute high quality products. So when I look at or when I think about stuff like AI, which is and Palmer was the first to say, look, yeah, we create killer robots, but really we have a ridiculous AI platform that controls everything, and that's actually the product. So when I think about the guardrails and how to control this, and if government can get involved, like you said, it would take a unified global government to do this.
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
Well, right. Yeah. So I am far more in most spaces. I am far more a proponent of private enterprise grabbing this and running with it than having government intervention. And it doesn't mean no guardrails, right? Government serves a really important purpose. But when we talk about AI, that moratorium and, hey, don't build anything right now because we're freaked out. Look, the answer is not box Uber out of the city because we want our taxis. The answer is Uber is a better product. Right. Let it proliferate. And so all these different questions with AI of where the guardrails are, what's allowed, what's not, who it pisses off, how it disrupts things, should AI be able to create music, and do you have to credit the humans for music? Well, maybe music is just something different moving forward, right? At one point, we
That's a
hired
good
people to
point.
paint pictures and
Yeah.
portraits, and then it was photographers, and now we need less and less of that. It's not pump the brakes and don't do it.
What was Tristan saying the narrow path is? What was his recommendation exactly? Like, he says between overregulation and leashing, there's a narrow path. What Brett was the narrow path?
That was a
That's
bit
unclear to
I
me.
think I think it's a little bit murky to him too. Like, he's trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
But basically, what I like about what he's doing is he's trying to raise the collective consciousness of humanity to say, hey, we have to be intentional about this. And I do think that's a good message. I don't think the savior is coming from government in this. I completely agree with what you say. I mean, SpaceX is a great example of way, way more efficient than anything NASA ever did.
Oh my God.
By many factors over. We're actually investors in SpaceX too, and that's one of our best investments. And it's obvious to me that we need a collective consciousness awakening in humanity, and that, I'm a little woo-woo too, as you know, and that is happening.
Yeah.
Like, that's happening more and more. And the reason I think it's happening more and more is because we're on the cusp of having the most powerful technology in the history of humanity. I mean, this is it. This is the moment.
Yeah.
And it's our lifetime, and it's probably within the next 10 years that we really have to figure out how to get there together as humanity, so that we have that future abundance. And that future of abundance I can see really clearly. We're talking about the eradication of almost all major disease, maybe all major disease. We're talking about
Through
food
gene
food
editing,
abundance, gene editing, water abundance. I mean, it's going to be an amazing future, and a creative abundance.
And seeing robots taking care of watering plants, like actually, what all we know as human beings is like, work will set you free. That's not a great slogan. We all know where that came from. but this idea that humans are here to work, and now we're saying maybe not. Like, these robots can work for 14 cents an hour.
Yeah. Well, I think the bigger question that I like to play with is, where does capitalism fit at all? So capitalism has served a very good purpose over the last several hundred years for creative expansion. But if we move, if we fast forward 50 years, we're looking at how do we protect current workforce and humanity, and what does it mean to be human, and what do you do with your days and your time? And there has to be a point, if you have robots doing everything and AI doing a lot of the thinking, there has to be a point where the day-to-day of humans is completely different.
Completely different.
Completely different.
And we're going to see that in our lifetime. And how exciting is that? I mean that is really exciting to me, because my thesis for that is we're going to be much more spiritual beings as a result. Like once all the base necessities are taken care of, we're going to have a lot more of a collective consciousness of taking care of each other.
Yeah.
And I actually think we are literally in an evolutionary process right now. We are in the process of birthing the future of humanity, and we've got to make it together with that. And the theme for TED again, Humanity Reimagined.
Yeah.
This is the most important topic right now, because AI, think about, it's not just AI, right? Quantum computing. If you watch the 60 Minutes on that, we're locked into an existential race on that versus China too. And last year's TED, the one of the most shocking talks I saw was Harmonious Nevin, who is the head of Google's quantum computing division, showing a stable calculation with their quantum chip, a stable math calculation, which quantum's hard to make stable today, just the way quantum physics works. But by the end of last year, like, one of the things that, again, almost nobody is talking about is Google announced the Willow chip, and the Willow chip, at that point in time, it's already been beaten now many times over by China, by Microsoft, et cetera. But at that point in time, December of last year, was the most powerful quantum chip ever made. And it did a benchmark calculation in 5 minutes, that so complex algorithmic calculation that would take a classical computer, which depends on ones and zeros, versus qubits in a quantum computer, which can be a 1 or a 0, or 1 and a 0, or neither, all at the same time. Like it depends on, it works on quantum physics and quantum waves and the fact that the observer effect kind of gets the wave function to collapse and then it becomes a 1 or 0. It's really wild, like how this stuff works. And that means that it's exponentially faster computing. But comparing that computer that did a 5-minute calculation, it would take a classical computer 700 times the known age of the universe to do the same calculation. So the known age of the universe is 13.8 billion years. So literally 700 times that to do that same calculation with a classical supercomputer. And what Harmonious Nevin said on stage at TED last year is he said, the only thing we can figure out is it's computing in a different dimension. This is on stage at TED, the head of quantum computing at Google. And so just to run through this really quickly, AI, quantum computing is going to dramatically accelerate AI. Like it's not even touching AI really yet. And then robotics, which there was a whole robot section at this year's TED, is the physical manifestation of AI. It's like, now you give AI a body, you give it, physical humanoid features. We saw that on the TED stage.
We did. We saw it.
One of the talks that's live now is about this new robot called Neo. Interesting name. We know where that came from.
Yeah. Some Matrix fans.
Yeah. So, this is the moment. This is a really, really interesting moment for humanity.
I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit. Because for those who say, oh my God, I've heard about
so much no more AI.
No more AI, please.
I love it.
Yeah.
So TED is known for its goosebump moments as well, of artistry and things that are not just with technology. I'll tell you, for me, actually, some of my most inspired moments were actually seeing not AI taking over things, but the collaboration of AI and people, artists coming together. We heard, actually it started out, we heard one of the most incredible classical orchestra, just
my God,
with no AI. It was just like remembering the love of classical music and hearing, it still amazes me. If you think about, for those who've been to a classical concert, you're hearing 50 people with these different instruments, wind and horns and air and all these instruments and violins in sync. And these guys were really good, of course.
That was Josh Bell.
Josh Bell. The sound coming out of that was like, I don't care the fanciest technology, the crying, the soul crying in a human, the vibration that creates. Last night I was at an EDM concert. It was a very good EDM concert last night. It had its own vibration to it. And it was a wonderful vibration at the EDM concert. But you give me that violin, that 500-year-old technology or 1,000-year-old technology, and how it moves us. And he was just talking about the power, like, don't forget about the humanness of these things. And so I want to ask you guys a question. On the human side of seeing, and a part of it, of the artistry side, the design side, what were some of your favorite talks that really talked about the beauty, whether it's being enhanced by AI or not enhanced at all? What were some of your most inspired as just human beings on the technology and the design side or entertainment side?
Well, actually, I wrote one down, but I just want to make the point on that night. That was Wednesday night. And we had a proud Austin moment that night because that was the same night and the same session that John Mackey gave his talk on the win-win-win philosophy in business and life. And his talk, it was beautiful philosophy. Everybody should watch that talk when it goes live.
Amazing. Or watch it on my podcast because it's in the podcast too.
And for those watching who don't know who John Mackey is, he's the founder, or co-founder, and was the longtime CEO of Whole Foods, a friend of ours, and was on your podcast, and wrote the foreword to my book, The Entrepreneur's Essentials, one of my best friends. And he rocked that talk. And that talk, just that evening, I think I rated all the talks as must watch. I think all the talks that evening were really, really good. But one of the talks that really moved me a lot was actually the following. It was the end of that night, and it was Duncan. Sorry, I got my nights fixed up. I think that was Tuesday night that John Mackey talked.
Yeah.
But it was on Wednesday night where Duncan Keegan talked about the beautiful sanctity of parenting and loss. You may remember that was the one where he lost his son.
Yeah.
And there was not a dry eye in that house.
Yeah.
And the point he made is, if we're not for this as human beings, then what are we for? This is not something that AI can do. That soul level connection, that truly loving each other, And that is consciousness. I mean, that is self-awareness and the emotions of love and fear and beauty. And that talk was just
He lost a son to
it moved
a
me
gang
so much.
thing, and here he is. He spent his life helping basically inner city like gangs basically form peace treaties.
Actually, that was another talk, but that also hit me really hard in the heart too.
They both were. He lost his son
Duncan
too.
Keegan was the one that was the Irish guy.
Oh
But the one about the gang member who
Wow.
lost his son, that took my breath away.
That took my breath
Yeah.
away. To spend
that
your
was,
whole life trying to create peace, and he did, between the Bloods and the Crips,
Yeah,
two really
yeah,
tough
yeah.
gangs in LA, and losing his son, and instead of becoming angry or pissed, becoming like part of the solution. How about for you two? Well, in that category, inspired, moved, really took your breath away.
In the entertainment category?
I mean, you pick it.
Yeah, I think that I don't have one from the entertainment category. There were a lot of super impressive performances. I think that one of my takeaways through it, somewhat contrary to what you just said about hearing things from 1,000 years old and it being irreplaceable, I'm curious to see how we digest and interpret that stuff 10 years from now and 50 years from now. And I think that you could feel the tension between the protective mechanisms of this is what makes us truly human and nothing will ever replace this, and my thought of everything will change. And who currently, I mentioned this earlier, but who currently hires somebody to paint a portrait of them? A tiny fraction of those that once did, right? And it doesn't mean that the portrait doesn't hold its own space, but I think we're going to go into an era where you have to question what art is and whether it matters, whether it's made from a robot or a human. And I think that curiosity is what I left with. And I tend to lean in the direction of we will find new mediums that will allow us to design new things. And sometimes that might mean you get better at prompting or you get better at conditioning a robot to do it, right? And your robot is unique in that way. But I think that there's going to be a whole new category of stuff that opens up. And in some cases, largely replaces the former. And I don't think that's bad. I think that it's
You
scary.
think it's just evolution?
Yeah, I think it's scary to people, specifically those that derive their well-being, sense of worth, and financial happiness from art. But I think that's part of the deal.
Yeah, I'm going to date myself, but do you remember the book Who Moved My Cheese?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
We're in a Who Moved My Cheese moment, but it's like
100%.
exponentially, we're moving exponential cheese at this point. I did love the talk. The guy that it was a hilarious talk. The founder of Mischief. Do you remember
yeah.
Mischief?
Oh, God, that was
Like
great.
his kind of AI art and his ATM machine that
Hilarious.
he showed at Art Basel in Miami, where it was just an experiment where people would go up to the ATM and it had a display that showed people's balances, and it became this kind of
It became
competition.
It was like a video game of who had the lowest balance.
Right, who had the
and they had a leaderboard like your old school video games. When you'd put your card in, it would score you for the lowest balance.
Right, but then a
People were
guy
cheering you on.
came that had like a $3 million balance, right?
Right.
Some guy rolled up.
Diplo.
I mean,
Yeah.
was it?
Diplo,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
Big
that's
Diplo
it.
came in.
Yeah, it was just that was just so
That
telling.
was interesting too with the car as well, how like the car became such
Oh,
a
yeah.
big factor to people's lives where they all showed up at the museum, and you can just tell.
Talk about that. What happened? They gave away how many? He gave away. There's this car. It was an old PT Cruiser. And how many keys did he give away? I
Like
don't
over
know.
3,000 keys. Or
Like
something
3,000
that.
keys. You got to
Yeah.
basically everybody got to own this car.
Yeah.
And tell them what happened with that little experience. Like what happened? They just followed the car around the United States and they kept passing it, right?
Yeah, they kept following the car around, and they finally parked it in the museum. I can't remember the location of the museum, and they're like, if you want to come and see this car, come to this museum, and all these people got connected over that way, and I thought that's kind of beautiful in a way, weird but beautiful.
And they changed the car along the way too.
Exactly,
Like
they got
totally
to paint all over the
spray-painted
car.
in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's community, like a shared
It's
back
community.
to like the shared our shared community and shared economics. whether
They
it's
thought at one
Airbnb
point
or-
the car was stolen, and then 4 months later it reappeared and just continued its whole tour around the United States. It went coast to coast, like incredible.
I also thought that it was so basic, but it was really cool. I thought they were showing now that we're getting so good at learning about atoms and molecules and nanoparticles, that what if the things in our everyday life, we kind of have a very materialistic perspective. That's a lamppost. That's a car. That's the road. They break down. And what do we do as humans? We throw them away. We throw everything away.
Yeah.
I love what my wife says in her book. Well, where is away when we throw things away?
Yeah.
It's landfills. There's no way. We don't take it off of Earth. And so this idea that everything, if you understand on the molecular level and you treat it more holistically and not as some item that was here to serve you at your pleasure and then be disposed of, can self-repair, can be reused. Like they were talking about road base that was intelligent. Like when water would get into the cracks, it would self-repair, would literally have the intelligence, almost like its own artificial DNA to repair itself.
This was Mark Miadownik. I marked him down. Self-repairing roads and concrete. I didn't even know that existed.
Isn't that crazy?
I thought that was so cool. Yeah.
And so the fundamental of that was, if I remember, was basically they embed organisms into the material, the concrete or the asphalt. And when air hits the organism, it wakes the organism up. So when oxygen hits it, it wakes up. But they also embed functionally food for the organism inside of the concrete. So the organism wakes up, it finds its food, it eats the food, and then it excretes concrete as the byproduct.
Right.
And that's how it repairs.
Right.
Yeah, it was a trip.
I mean, that was so cool.
I love the topic too about it turns out that I had no idea. Here we are, we have hungry people on this planet of 9 billion plus people. We have huge hunger short things, and then it turns out we waste about half of our perishable food on vegetables,
Yeah.
our fruits.
You called that talk out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you.
I mean, you want to talk about that talk? Because I was really inspired. You want to talk like what was the highlight of that talk?
I love how it's she's using like composition material that you can actually put it on your fruits or veggies and it can last maybe like 4 to 2 weeks later.
It's like a second skin that like doubles
Exactly.
the person.
And you can eat it.
And it's
which is-
natural.
Yeah, instead of
And
like
so
wax.
this idea of not wasting our food, that probably is a good idea when you have a hungry planet.
It
That,
probably also tastes a lot better because it's going to taste a lot fresher when you do eat it.
for sure.
Because of
Yeah.
that protective layer.
For sure. Brad, we're rounding third here, guys, on this because we don't want to give too much away. You guys,
We don't want to make this like a Lex Friedman
we don't
3.5 hour
have,
thing.
I don't have enough audience. I don't have Joe Rogan's
Right,
poll.
exactly.
We can't be 3.5 hour. But let's talk about the Mentalist. Let's talk about Oz Perlman. So it turns out that Oz Perlman, who was called the Mentalist, if you look him up, he talks about reading minds, that there's this whole power of being able to read people's minds. And I know it sounds like hocus pocus, not really possible to do. I had never heard of Oz Perlman. I guess a lot of people out there have heard of Oz Perlman. And it was the strangest thing. He basically told all 1,800 people in the audience, close your eyes and imagine somebody, and think about this at home. Close your eyes and think of somebody, if you could, dead or alive, that you'd want to have dinner with. And just think about that question, because I think it's a fun question just to think about anyways. And then so everyone did that. We took a breath, opened our eyes, and Oz, I'm going to give you a long story short, within 10 minutes of asking a couple just clarifying questions, was enabled, like he'd pick someone from the audience and say, that's the person you want to have dinner with. And one of them was, what was one of them? It was the, not William the Conqueror, it was Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great.
Pretty
yeah.
random.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turns out my friend Darius, by the way, had him on his podcast.
Oh, really?
And Darius chose Darius the Conqueror from Persian folklore. He guessed live on his podcast, Darius the podcast. And so
I've never even heard of
I
that
know.
either.
person.
He guessed Darius the Conqueror.
Crazy.
And then then you're thinking, okay,
That's
there's no
incredible.
way that you can read people's minds like this. Like, and he just kept saying, this is not like magic. I just know between facial expressions, I can feel energy. I can read people. I've been doing this so long that I can come up with it. And you're like, yeah, sure. Well, I'm sure these people, they must have been planted in the audience. There's no way you're going to guess on a first guess. So you just figure it's planted. So here's what he does. He says, you see this Frisbee I just bought on Amazon? He's on the TED Talk stage. He's in his red circle. Little flimsy material things. Did he throw it, or did he have someone else throw
handed it to somebody else, told them to close their eyes, and then throw it out into the audience.
Just throw it out to anybody. And guess who caught that Frisbee?
I don't know who caught it. Just joking.
And Brett, what did you tell me? Not only did you
yeah.
catch the Frisbee,
Yeah.
what did you say that you knew you were going to catch the Frisbee?
Yeah.
Because I talked about
Here's
that.
here's the crazy thing. So the guy that threw the Frisbee, Dylan, is also a Henry Crown Fellow.
At the Aspen Institute.
Of the Aspen Institute, and I'm a Henry Crown Fellow. Josh Baer, the founder of Capital Factor, is the one that nominated me for it.
It's very successful entrepreneurs who talk about How do you go from success to significance? It's kind of the
Right.
tagline.
So there were 6 of us total out of 1,700 at TED there. There's like 450 Henry Crown Fellows in the world. And when Dylan threw that with his eyes closed, I knew it was going to come to me.
And he
I mean,
hugged it.
I
He
literally
hugged it.
just, I mean, Chantel saw it, was just like,
I know.
I just grabbed it because
One-handed.
I knew,
And
I
if
knew
you
it was
guys,
coming.
I think we're gonna try to post this if we can. Are we allowed to post the throw? Can we post this section or not?
I don't think you can post it, but it'll go live.
When
I
it
mean,
goes live. Anyways,
yeah.
this wasn't like a toss. This was like throwing it halfway across the football field.
Went up in
with
the
a
air
curve.
and hooked. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, there's no way you can.
Yeah.
You couldn't make that. You couldn't do that.
Yeah, but I
twice.
just knew it was coming to
So
me.
take
I
the
just
story-
felt
take the story
the
from there,
energy
Brad.
of that.
So you catch the frisbee.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So then, you know, I'm called up to stage, and so I go up on stage, and he had a guy, Jeff Johnson, who's in the audience, who is
Random
a
guy.
legit, you know, also attendee. I mean, there were no plants there. I wasn't a plant there. And this guy, Jeff Johnson, was, you know, had the name of his person, and Oz Perlman said to me, like, hey,
It
I'm
brings you
going
on
to
stage.
essentially,
Brings
right,
you on
yeah, he brings
stage.
me on stage, and he says, I'm gonna essentially show you this in a crystal ball in my hand.
You're gonna be the mentalist, not
right,
me.
and
Brett
you're
Earth's
gonna be the
a
mentalist. And he's like, there's nothing in my hands, and there was nothing in his hands, and it was really wild. It was like he projected the answer, and the answer was Barack Obama. But
So
but
wait,
he,
wait,
and
I
this
gotta
was
paint this to you.
yeah, it was crazy.
So he
I mean, it was
literally
really
writes
crazy.
down on a board, write down who it is, and this guy,
Well,
Jeff
this is
Johnson's,
Jeff
Let's
Johnson.
say
writes it
let's
down,
say he's 100 yards from you,
Yeah.
and he's holding it to his chest,
Yep.
and he says to you, close your eyes,
Yep.
imagine you're in a bowl, and
Yeah.
what do you say? Imagine like you're opening, and you're actually looking at a piece of paper, correct?
Right, from his diary. He said
From
he
his
said from
diary.
Jeff Johnson's diary. Yeah.
You open
Yeah.
your eyes, and you're going to see a piece of paper, and the first thing you see, say it out loud. What was the process for you? Because you guessed Barack Obama, and it was Barack Obama,
Yeah.
which makes
Yeah.
crazy ass sense.
It was like a projection. I mean, it was wild.
What was it?
It was
Like,
really
was
wild.
it a flash of a name in your head? Like you were so certain when you said it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Was it a voice? Was it a light? Was it a writing? Like you can't just like casually talk about this. What was it?
Yeah. It's funny because, you know, he called, you know, Oz Perlman called me Brett with double T's.
Yeah.
And then everybody at the TED party afterwards like, it's Brett with double T's. I got to ask you, man, how was that done? Et cetera, et cetera. It was like, it was real projection. Like, you know how you read about people that can kind of project into people's minds. And
Do you think Oz was projecting into your
Yeah,
mind and you
yeah,
just said
I
anything?
did.
So you think he was the translator?
it felt, I'll tell you that it felt, I've never been hypnotized, but it felt a little bit like hypnosis up there. It was a very warped kind of space, and I've been on stage a lot, so I've given lots of presentations, but it felt like it kind of felt like a little bit of a warped presence, and it felt like a little bit like a hypnosis, and the answers popped in.
I mean, you just said it so calmly and so
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you
Well, it's
absolutely
fun.
you absolutely knew the answer.
Yeah, it was fun,
Everyone
yeah.
out night, you were my party favorite because everyone's like, Brett, like,
Right.
was he in on the joke? I'm like, trust
Yeah.
me, Brett would
Yeah.
never do that.
Yeah. It was really, really wild.
So let's talk about this. Now we're
Yeah.
talking about AI. We talked about quantum physics. What about
Yeah.
telepathy? I mean,
Yeah.
what you're talking about now is telepathy.
Yeah.
So all I know,
And there's that famous podcast right now called the Telepathy Tapes, which
if you haven't seen the
which was
Telepathy
more
Tapes.
popular at one point than Joe Rogan's podcast. Did you know that? It was rated #1 above Joe Rogan.
No.
Yeah.
And so we're hearing more and more about near-death experiences, telepathy, hitting
The
the,
nature
edge
of
quantum.
consciousness,
We've got Google announcing they have no idea what dimension things are being calculated in, and it's an really exciting time to be alive. I think my gut. I'm going to take you guys to kind of takeaways. We're going to wrap this up. I think one of my takeaways, you know, when I think about all these conversations, is we are at a moment, guys. I mean, think about this. 150 years ago, if I told you there was something called an airplane, you'd be like, never a chance. We're not going to go in the sky at about the speed of sound in a tube with a bunch of people. Like, impossible. Like, birds can do that. We have no idea. Like, things that are just impossible. You can go back 75 years. I mean, germs. We didn't know what atoms were. We didn't know what germs were. I mean, Spanish flu was so bad. in the early 1900s because we didn't have germ theory yet. We were still delivering babies when our doctors weren't washing their hands. That's like, so I know for sure, here's what I do know for sure. We are on the edge of not only so many exciting things, but literally we're going to be rewriting our science books. The way Einstein had the theory of relativity and other things, we're already hitting things of like things that we have that just seem absolutely impossible or beyond reach. There was an article yesterday, actually, in the New York Times, that they're finding what could look like the first signs of life on another planet, 200 light years away.
125, actually.
125 light years away?
It's still impossibly hard to get to, but yes.
For now.
Yeah, for now.
For now.
Yeah.
So
unless we figure out faster and light speed travel, which I think we will.
I'm going to leave with that, but I'm going to ask you guys just like final question. If there was, again, we talked about that TED is about ideas worth spreading. As we kind of wrap this up, whether it's in your day-to-day life selling real estate, helping processing credit, bringing data databases to the world, or helping with multifamily real estate and impact investing and workforce housing. I'm going to start with you, Brad. What's one idea that you got from TED that is an idea worth spreading?
I don't have a massive driving passion behind my day-to-day life that's pulling me towards an outcome. And I think that in the absence of that, getting repetitions in to get better and grow personally is my chosen path. I think one of the major takeaways of being there is that, and this, sounds kind of cliche, but is that it starts with thinking bigger, right? It starts with thinking about a bigger problem, a bigger solution, and taking the time to do that if you want to create massive change. And the beautiful thing about the TED environment is that it is riddled with people that are doing that, and it makes it feel more possible.
Yeah, I think that's a great take. Inspiration is what I hear you say.
Yeah.
Chantel, what's an idea worth spreading from you or processing?
Well, I think that's really great what Brad said, and it's very inspirational being at TED and just knowing how many impactful people are there to just create a welcoming environment and also just helping the planet and other humans. I think that's so important is connection, which is like Jennifer Wallace. One thing that really sticks with me is, her about matter. So do we matter as a person, and knowing that do we matter to others? And, going to TED, I was figuring out, I'm going through a transition with my career right now, and I just feel like all I'm about is real estate. And do I really matter to others? Like if I do something else, what is that mattering that's going to actually matter to me? And so before going to TED, I was working on a children's book about social anxiety and, helping kids with social anxiety. And by, going to TED and talking to others, it showed me what's important is to help kids and adults too. I actually met an adult named Karen, and she is incredible because she has a son that's going through social anxiety. And she's like, I don't know what to do with him. And whenever I try to talk to him, it's like this whole wall builder, that this wall's building between them, and that she can't empathize with him, or he feels like she's just attacking him. And so I told her some of the things that I went through, and that can help her and her son build that relationship as he grows older. And she found that very inspiring, and she said that actually what you're going to do is help adults too. And I never really thought of it in that way when she said that. And I thought that was really incredible that I can actually be helping kids and adults through this, what we call social anxiety, which is not all the way out there yet, because a lot of people ask me, what is social anxiety? And that's a whole different topic and discussion. But whenever, going back to Jennifer Wallace, it just made me realize I always wanted to start a foundation too when I was younger. And that foundation is actually helping kids and adults now with social anxiety. So going to TED and hearing about Jennifer Wallace mattering, that's where I found myself that, okay, I can see how I can matter to others by being there and showing that I'm a safety net, that they can actually open up and everything's going to be full of love, and it's all going to be comfort and trust to these kids and adults, and showing that their words do matter.
It's incredible.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Chantel, for me, as you say that, I really resonate with your comment. I feel like you're born to do this.
Thank you.
I know this is your first podcast. I know you were a little nervous even coming out
Oh,
with
yeah.
a podcast. But you keep answering the call when your brain says not to do it, or this is scary, or this is beyond my comfort zone, or something new. There's something in your soul that just keeps saying yes, in spite of all the information that wants you to say no.
Yeah.
A lot of people, as you know, it's easy to watch TV. It's easy to do passive things. Lots of things to take our mind away from not having to actually address those fears. And I wonder if going to TED for you partly isn't, as you rise in this new leadership role, you know, we're given, I don't know if you've heard that there's a biblical thing that, you know, when God said to Moses, hey, you're going to be the communicator for me and all my commandments. I'm going to go through you. And Moses said, why me, God? I stutter. I've got a stutter. Like I am not your person. Like there's much better people who could communicate than me. And God said, no, you are the one. And I think sometimes in life, it is those challenges that we're giving that when we rise above them makes us those leaders that others can be inspired by. And I feel like I sense that you're really in that process right now.
Well, thank you.
And I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing for you before I go to Brett.
Mm-hmm.
Since you're younger, hipper, and cooler than all of us combined, do you want to call bullshit on anything that you heard there? Because a lot of it's these futures. Is there any I call BS as from a thing or no obvious?
No, obvious. I think everyone's standpoint, what they said, is like, you know, it's incredible. So I think what your viewers are going to see is different opinions and observations
Yeah.
that they're going to hear.
Great.
So I think that's great.
Brett?
Well, I mean, my number one thing was being there with Chantel. I mean, just seeing her blossom like that and seeing her at this inflection point, and she was just, I mean, she's going into the boldest leadership environment you can go into.
You are.
And the connection she made there, and it was funny at the party on Thursday night. She was sitting in this chair, and people just kept on coming and sitting by her, and it's like the doctors in the house, and she was just helping them through social anxiety. It was really awesome. For me, I mean, you know, there were so many great moments. I mean, one of the things we didn't cover were all the comedians that were so funny, like Jenna
great.
Friedman and
Oh,
stuff like
my
that.
God,
She's
Jenna
hilarious.
There's a lot of like super funny moments, like when Jenna Friedman's talk goes live, definitely watch that. But the if there's an idea that I really have wanted forever, and I've thought about this probably for 15 years, and it's cool that it's a friend of mine that's manifesting this, Bradley Tusk, giving his TED Talk about mobile voting.
Oh, great.
And how he just open sourced the whole thing, all the software, everything else, for any government to use to deploy mobile voting. Because turnout, he was making the point that turnout for the elections in New York City, which is a very opinionated city, are like 7% of the
Right.
populace.
Wow.
He was saying the problem is that in these primaries, you get all the extreme candidates because only about 7% the most extreme people go, and then you're tending to get candidates that tend to be extreme and not representing the majority that tend to be more moderate.
Yeah, and just it just makes no sense that other countries have mobile voting and we don't. It just makes
2025, and we can't figure out a way to.
Yeah.
We can transfer our Bitcoin,
yeah.
but we can't vote.
So that's something that I've wanted for a long time. That's been obvious to me for a long time, and something I really want to see happen in the world. So I mean, if Bradley's watching this, you know, I wish you a lot of luck, and I hope that TED Talk, because he was there to say, look, I'm not going to make any money from this. This is just totally for free. It's totally open source. Who wants to work with me on this to propagate it across
great.
government? So
That's great.
I thought that was
I
fantastic.
actually have this reminded me today that there's a couple action items of areas I want to support, and from the mobile voting to what have you. Well, guys, I think this was just incredible. I'm really
What was your
grateful.
favorite, though? You got to say what's your favorite one. I mean, there were so many.
There was just so many.
I wrote down about 30 talks here,
Yeah.
and there were like 80 talks.
You
I
know what
think.
actually my favorite moment was?
Yeah.
It was a dinner.
Oh gosh, the dinner was great.
It was a
fun,
dinner where
yeah.
I got invited to a pretty cool dinner with some of the top Fortune 500 CEOs, and I'm used to just being like I'm not used to like the C-suite, celebrity C-suite, and they just think completely differently than us, and not in a bad way, but it's like they worry about their safety. I had no idea that like a CEO today has to worry, especially after the assassination. I mean, like they're worried about like going. Do you know they go into office? They stagger their times. They have security detail. They don't go through the same doors. they like death threats on certain companies. I won't mention which companies, but like they're talking about death threats, like to be a CIO, a CEO, a COO. And it made me really grateful to just be a small random real estate guy in a small C-suite, you know, a small company. Because the responsibility that you take on with that with social media and these platforms, people get very angry. And I really appreciated that. And the other thing I thought was interesting at dinner from these top CEOs was like, if we do dip into a recession or a depression, if we have this instability, what people don't realize right now is it's going to be different than any other time in history, because usually you have a downturn, but it's followed by an upturn. And when you have the upturn, you have rehiring. These companies will unemploy you. You'll get severanced. But then usually there's an uptick. It brings you back. But if you have AI coming at the same time, half those jobs may not come back. So these ideas of universal basic income, what are we going to do? What is work? A recession or depression or some economic downturn may really accelerate the question of our government, our society on these issues faster than we think. I thought that was a really interesting point.
Can I make one point on that?
Please.
Because that'd be a tough one. Well, it'd be a tough one to close on, because people could get really fearful on that. I will say one of the companies that my wife and I are investors in is here in Austin, called Zen Business. Zen Business now worth over $1 billion. And Zen Business, during the pandemic, one of the statistics I know where that was a really tough time for us to all go through. I mean, really tough. Social isolation, like lots of jobs lost, businesses shutting down. That was a time in U.S. history where there were more businesses founded each of the main pandemic years than at any other point in U.S. history.
Wow.
So what those big company CEOs are not forecasting in it is how necessity is the mother of invention, and how AI will allow many more startups to be born. If they're all individually smaller companies, we're talking about many, many, many more of them. And that will lead to a future of highly personalized products and services that we can't even imagine today.
Right.
And so they may be right about the big jobs, about the jobs not coming back to the big companies because of AI efficiency. But where they're wrong on that is all the boom and startups
Right.
that will
But it's
happen.
just like going from the agricultural age to the industrial age. It's going to take a new set of skills.
Oh, for sure.
Humans are going to have to.
I tell everybody, if you're not using AI multiple times a day right now, you really need to be. Like, you do not want to be obsolete.
There's no doubt. Well, I'm just going to end with saying, first of all, it's a Saturday. Thank you guys for coming. This was super fun. I actually needed this because I feel like it's hard to tell people that experience of 5 days was so intense. I want to remind you here in the audience too, like that, remember that on Investing on Purpose, curiosity, and I've heard this again and again and again, no matter what we say about technology, where it's going to go, curiosity is our savior as humans. Curiosity, generosity, staying connected to each other as human beings. And remember ultimately that we are, and that we are collectively in charge of our future.
Mm-hmm. We have agency.
We do have agency. And if you're watching this podcast, you're probably have enough intellectual capacity that you have your own curiosity. So I'm just going to end with saying thank you for listening. And it's not really a passive thing. I hope you can take away from this episode some thoughts. Again, how can you take a couple thoughts if you know what's coming and double down on our own humanity, which ultimately, what do we need to do to serve each other? How do we make life better and better through our products and services on this earth? So I hope you're inspired to do that. Stay positive. It's great when you have brilliant friends who can back their optimism with facts. It's not just woohoo, I feel good, but really, really smart conversations from people. And Brad, I appreciate you just being your intellectual curiosity, whether you agree or disagree. I just love your intellectual curiosity and your authenticity, and I love what you're bringing to that. And so thank you for being here.
Thank you, man.
And your strength, your precision with your words and your strength really came through. So I just appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time. Hey, hope you enjoyed the episode. Love to hear from you. You can reach me on all the major platforms with Investing on Purpose. And if you want to reach out to me personally, reach out to me at JP Newman on my LinkedIn. Would love to hear from you. You guys have been giving me some amazing feedback. I'm watching the audience grow, and I'm really grateful to you, and hope these episodes can continue helping you on your wealth journey to becoming a true fulfillionaire. Enjoy.